Today I'm going to continue my series on the temple cleansing by talking about an undesigned coincidence relating to the temple cleansing as reported in the Gospel of John. As those of you who've been watching this YouTube channel know, an undesigned coincidence is a connection between or among the details of different accounts. In a classic undesigned coincidence, you have a question or a puzzle that arises from one account. It doesn't have to be an urgent one, just a question that could reasonably be asked. And then another account, in an apparently casual manner, answers that question or provides an explanation. Today's undesigned coincidence begins with the account of Jesus' trial at the end of his life, as given in the Gospel of Mark. In Mark 14, it mentions that witnesses came forward, and he calls them false witnesses, against Jesus. And they said, "We heard him say, I will destroy this temple made with hands, and I will build another not made with hands in 3 days. But Mark says that their witness testimony did not agree. He doesn't say how it disagreed, but just that it did not agree. We find a similar account in the Gospel of Matthew. Now, how would we explain this? It doesn't right off look like a pure lie, just something that they made up because they hated Jesus. They wanted to get him in trouble. For one thing, destroying the temple wouldn't be so easy. They didn't say that he would defile the temple or that he would blaspheme against the temple, or just even that he blasphemed against the temple. They said that he threatened, he said, I will destroy this temple. And then why raise it up? That seems odd. Why would you say, if you were just trying to get Jesus in trouble, that he said specifically that in 3 days he would raise up the temple again, not made with hands? What this looks like is a garbled version of something that actually happened. I would say that if something like that were reported on, shall we say, a partisan news site today, we would get on our phones or on our computers and we would Google and look up and try to find out, what did the person really say that was garbled or misreported in this way? So it invites us to look for an account that lies behind this. But you will look in vain in Matthew, Mark, and Luke for that account. There is no other incident to which they could be referring that is told in those Gospels. But there is in John. So if we go back to John 2, completely different context, not related at the end of Jesus' life, not relating his trial. In fact, John does not relate that witness testimony. He doesn't tell about it. But when he tells about that early temple cleansing, that as we've discussed, some scholars question the historicity of, John says that the leaders came to Jesus and they said, give us a sign by what authority you do these things. I would note this is a difference with the later temple cleansing recounted in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. They don't ask him for a sign. They're probably done asking him for signs by that time. In John, he simply answers cryptically, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. What does he mean by that? Well, he doesn't explain. The narrator glosses that and explains that by saying he spoke of the temple of his body. Those who he's having a dialogue with clearly take him to mean the literal temple, and we will talk about a little more of that dialogue in a later video, where they express shock that he would raise the temple in 3 days if it were destroyed, because it had taken so long even to build it to that point. But John explains that he means to predict his death and resurrection. I would note here as an aside, some scholars try to say that because the evangelists, and John in particular, thought they were inspired by the Holy Spirit, they thought they had a right to put their inspired interpretations into Jesus' mouth, even though he did not realistically or recognizably say those interpretations. What we find in John is exactly the opposite. This is only one of several places where the narrator says in his own voice what he believes Jesus meant, but he retains the distinction between his own voice and what he's reporting Jesus saying. This is evidence of accurate reportage of what Jesus historically said. Getting back to the undesigned coincidence, we can see that this is very likely very, very likely, the incident that, shall we say, inspired the false and contradictory testimony against Jesus later on. It was misunderstood, it was discussed, and then later they said that he would destroy the temple and would raise it again in 3 days. Matthew gives it in slightly different wording, that he said, I am able to destroy this temple and raise it in 3 days. Okay, now it is possible that that kind of garbling or misreporting or embellishing of what Jesus said could happen in less than a week. That's what it would have had to have been if this conversation took place actually at the end of Jesus' ministry, if there was only one temple cleansing and it historically took place there and John just moved it along with everything else back to the beginning, though interestingly it's not reported in the Synoptic Gospels at all. So if John was moving it, he was not moving something that he found in that synoptic, shall we say, tradition, as scholars sometimes say. But it's more likely that with this kind of distortion, it took some time for it to happen. That at least would be a better explanation than that this conversation took place just a few days previously. Now, this is not just my point. This is a point that New Testament scholar Craig Blomberg has made as well, independently, stating that this is some evidence for an early conversation, that this conversation about the temple took place earlier. But of course, it's tied very closely to Jesus' early temple cleansing, because he's saying it in answer to their request for authority for him to carry out this disturbance in the temple, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Now, that's just one piece of evidence, and as far as the idea that John just made up that earlier conversation, he certainly does not appear to be attempting to explain what is in the Synoptic Gospels, because he doesn't tell their account of the trial before the Sanhedrin, and he makes no connection there, and they do not tell about the conversation in John. So that's a very classic undesigned coincidence, where each account has one half of the puzzle and they fit together. That's just one bit of information. I have other positive evidence. Next time I'm going to be talking about another undesigned coincidence between John and Mark that gives evidence of some kind of clash between Jesus and the Jerusalem religious rulers early in his ministry that is not reported in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, or Luke. So come back next time to hear that. Thanks for watching.